What if I told you that one of the most shocking moments at the 2025 American Cinematheque Awards didn't happen during the speeches, or the red carpet arrivals, or the backstage media frenzy, but in the split second when Michael B. Jordan, Hollywood's most bankable leading man, turned away from Meghan Markle in a move so quietly devastating that the entire room paused? What if I told you that a single refusal, one tiny, almost invisible moment, sent a ripple across the A-list circle so sharp that even veteran actors looked at each other with raised brows, wondering if they had just witnessed the beginning of a brand new Hollywood divide? And what if I told you that Meghan, who had entered the room fully expecting a triumphant PR moment, walked out fighting back tears after realizing she had just been denied access to the very world she's been desperately trying to re-enter? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's not pretend the American Cinematheque Awards is some ordinary event. It's not. This isn't one of those ceremonies where anyone with a big social media following gets invited. This is an awards night that demands legacy, prestige, merit, real contributions to film. It's the kind of room where the A-list doesn't just show up. They orbit one another carefully, purposefully, knowing their presence signals influence. And in 2025, all of that quiet, polished power revolved around one man, Michael B. Jordan. A man Hollywood respects. A man studios fight to work with. A man whose ascent has been so undeniable that even the old guard pays attention when he walks into a room. So when Meghan Markle arrived, unexpected, strategically dressed, and clearly prepared to reclaim some kind of spotlight, the energy shifted in a way that made people tilt their heads. You know that feeling when someone walks into a room with a plan that only they know about? That subtle tension? That quiet, buzzing uncertainty? That's exactly what happened. People felt it. Industry watchers felt it. Even the photographers sensed something unusual in the air. Meghan wasn't just attending. She was attempting something. But what she didn't realize, at least not yet, was that the room she stepped into was operating under a hierarchy she no longer belonged to. Middle build-up. Let's talk about why this moment matters now. Because Meghan has been trying to rebrand for months. Every public appearance carefully positioned. Every story seeded. Every stylistic choice curated. Whether it was her rumored bid for new Hollywood partnerships, her whispers about scripted series opportunities, or her attempts to align with high-influence social circles, the pattern was clear. She wanted back in. Back into the industry. Back into relevance. Back into the conversations happening in rooms like this one. Rooms that don't offer second chances easily. But Hollywood has a long memory. And the Cinematheque Awards? Even longer. This event is not about spectacle. It's about legacy. About honoring contributors who have transformed cinema, not those who have transformed headlines. And Michael B. Jordan embodies exactly what the event celebrates. His career arc isn't a story of scandal. It's a story of discipline, craft, and longevity. He didn't climb through controversy. He climbed through consistency. So when he entered the room that night, the respect was palpable. People didn't just greet him. They gravitated toward him. Directors, writers, actors, studio executives. They treated him like a man who had earned his place, not as someone chasing relevance. Now contrast that with Meghan's entry. While Michael arrived through the official pathway, publicists in tow, industry peers greeting him with genuine warmth, Meghan's entrance sparked a different reaction. Whispered exchanges, quick glances, politely strained smiles. The kind of micro-reactions people give when they're unsure whether to approach or avoid. Her presence wasn't celebrated. It was questioned. And if you know Hollywood, you know that's worse than open disapproval. Because Hollywood rarely confronts. It simply withdraws. Politely, of course. Quietly, always. But unmistakably. And yet, Meghan seemed determined to overcome the chill. Determined to insert herself into the evening's narrative. Determined to turn the Cinematheque Awards into her comeback moment. She smiled brightly. She scanned the room. She positioned herself near photographers. She approached key industry names with the kind of confidence that implied they all remembered her fondly. But the reactions she received were, at best, tepid, and at worst, politely dismissive. Still, she didn't give up. Because the real goal, the moment she had clearly been waiting for, was getting face-to-face with Michael B. Jordan. And this is where everything begins to unravel. Why Michael? Because aligning with him would be a PR jackpot. He's charismatic. He's respected. He's beloved. A single photo with him could imply that she was still connected to Hollywood's inner circle, still socially relevant, still someone the industry supported. She knew this. Her team knew this. And the moment she spotted him across the room, surrounded by A-listers, embraced by directors, spoken to by studio heads, you could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes. The moment she needed was right there. But here's where things take an unexpected turn. Because Michael wasn't just in the room. He was the room. People were lining up to greet him. Photographers were begging for angles. Fellow actors approached him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine admiration. And amidst all of this admiration, Meghan began making her slow, deliberate approach. She rehearsed her smile, adjusted her hair, made sure the cameras were within range. Her posture changed. Her steps became measured, intentional, and for a moment, just a moment, she looked like someone fully convinced that this was her moment to shine. But Hollywood moments have a strange habit of collapsing at the exact second someone tries to force them. As Meghan closed in, something subtle happened. Michael's team noticed. His publicist leaned in. A security detail repositioned. A PR manager stepped to the side. Their movements were small, but meaningful. The kind of movements people make when they're preparing to intercept. Because when a star is being honored, their media interactions become strictly controlled. Not every photo is allowed. Not every handshake is wise. Not every pairing is beneficial. Meghan approached anyway. And here's where the energy shifted instantly. Cameras lowered. Conversations paused. Several A-listers subtly turned their attention toward the moment unfolding. They didn't speak. They didn't intervene. They simply watched, as if they knew something Meghan didn't. She greeted Michael warmly, confidently, like they were longtime friends. But Michael didn't mirror that energy. He wasn't rude. He wasn't cold. But he wasn't open. He was polite in the way people are polite when they're buying time. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His posture didn't invite closeness. His replies were short, considerate, but distant. And Meghan, sensing the lukewarm temperature, pivoted to her goal. She suggested a quick photo. A simple pose. A friendly capture. Something light. Something casual. Something that could be interpreted, publicly, as a moment of mutual respect between two powerful figures. But Michael didn't agree. He didn't smile and say yes. He didn't pretend to consider it. He didn't glance at his team for approval. He simply said no. Not bluntly. Not rudely. Not dramatically. Just firmly. Calmly. Unmistakably. And the silence that followed lasted longer than the refusal itself. Because that no wasn't just a denial of a photo. It was a message. A boundary. A line drawn quietly in front of the entire A-list. And Meghan, who is rarely denied anything so publicly, felt the impact immediately. Her expression faltered. Her shoulders stiffened. Her breath caught. And for a split second, the mask of confidence slipped, revealing the shock beneath. The room noticed. The cameras noticed. Even Michael's team noticed. But none of them stepped in. Because in Hollywood, silence is often the loudest response. Meghan tried to recover. She laughed lightly, made a comment, tried to appear unfazed. But nothing she did softened the tension. Because Michael's refusal wasn't about her. It was about him. About protecting his brand. About avoiding associations that could turn his celebratory night into tabloid chaos. About ensuring that his moment, his honor, wasn't hijacked for someone else's storyline. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because the refusal was just the first blow. The real shock was still coming. And Meghan had no idea that the next 60 seconds would change everything. Because as she stepped back, trying to regain her composure, the most unexpected person in the room turned toward her and delivered the blow that would send her spiraling for the rest of the night. What if the person Meghan least expected to acknowledge her presence was also the one who made the moment collapse completely? What if the real sting of this night wasn't Michael's refusal at all, but what happened in the seconds that followed, when another Hollywood figure delivered a blow so subtle, so perfectly timed, that Meghan realized she wasn't just being denied a photo. She was being denied entry into an entire social circle. And that's exactly where we pick up. Because as Meghan stepped back, eyes wide, smile fragile, breath thin, the room didn't soften. No one rushed in with sympathy. No one offered a polite distraction. No one created an escape route. Instead, Someone turned toward her with a reaction that was even colder than Michael's calm refusal. It wasn't a rival. It wasn't an actress. It wasn't a former co-star or a critic or a journalist. It was a producer, one of the big ones. A name that makes studio interns hold their breath and Netflix executives rearrange schedules. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't embarrass her. He didn't even address her directly. He simply glanced her way, shook his head once, a tiny, almost invisible movement, and then turned to Michael with a tone that left no room for misunderstanding. And that sound, the tone, not the words, hit Meghan harder than anything Michael himself had said. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room full of people where one person's reaction, even a small one, suddenly shifts the energy of everyone around them? The kind of shift where you can feel the air go colder, the atmosphere tighten, the conversations take a turn even though nobody said outright what they were thinking? That's the exact sensation Meghan felt. That single head shake carried weight, authority, disapproval, and Meghan knew instantly what it meant. She wasn't welcome in that moment. But why? Why such a sharp signal from someone who didn't even know her personally? The answer lies in the deeper layers of Hollywood culture. Layers Meghan either misunderstood or underestimated. Because Hollywood isn't just about talent. It's about alignment, credibility, optics, timing, relevance, and public perception. When the wrong combination of those factors collides in the wrong moment, people who are hyper-aware of reputation, people like producers, react before you even realize you've stepped on a symbolic tripwire. This producer had been watching the entire interaction, not out of nosiness, but out of instinct. People like him scan every room they enter, every interaction, every potential PR disruption, every person who might create complications for the star they're supporting. And in this case, that star was Michael B. Jordan, a man whose public image is tightly managed, carefully maintained, and highly valuable. So when he saw Meghan approaching Michael with that confident smile and that unmistakable intent, he was already paying attention. And when he saw Michael politely decline her request, he understood the subtext immediately. He didn't need explanations. He didn't need context. He didn't need to hear the words. He knew why the refusal happened, and he agreed with it. That's why the headshake mattered. Because it wasn't rejection. It was reinforcement. And that reinforcement spread through the room like frost tracing across glass. Actors noticed it. Producers sensed it. The PR teams felt it. Even the photographers. The most opportunistic creatures in any awards event hesitated. But Meghan? She was standing right in the center of the freeze, pretending she didn't feel the temperature dropping around her. She tried to force a brief smile, but it wavered at the edges. She tried to adjust her posture, but her movements became mechanical. She tried to act unfazed, but her eyes betrayed her. And you know how eyes work in high-pressure moments. They don't lie. They expose the truth you're trying to hide. Meghan's truth was simple. She was embarrassed. But embarrassment wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that everyone saw it. Everyone saw the moment fall apart. Everyone saw the shift in her expression. Everyone saw her swallow hard, trying to regain her composure. Everyone saw the rejection and the reinforcement that followed. And in Hollywood, moments like that don't disappear quietly. They become whispered stories, subtle references, private anecdotes shared over cocktails at after-parties. The kind of stories that travel faster than official press releases and last longer than red carpet photos. But the night wasn't done punishing her. In fact, it was only getting started. As Meghan attempted to distance herself from the awkward moment, she tried to pivot, literally. A soft turn of her shoulders, a strategic repositioning, an attempt to blend into another cluster of industry faces. But blending into that crowd required something she didn't have anymore, belonging. Because when she approached the next group, an elegant circle of actors, producers, and one especially influential director, she found something even more unsettling. They weren't ignoring her. They were avoiding her. And not in an obvious, rude, turn your back kind of way. No, they avoided her in the Hollywood way, the polite way, the subtle way, the professional way, a glance that moved past her, a conversation that conveniently tightened its circle, a smile that didn't extend an invitation, a posture that shifted just an inch, but enough to block pathways into the group. Have you ever tried to join a conversation where the group closes itself without using a single word? That's what happened. Meghan tried stepping closer, adjusting her angle, waiting for someone to acknowledge her presence. But acknowledgement never came. The dialogue continued without a single pause. She stood there, smiling faintly, pretending she wasn't waiting for an opening. But she was. And the longer she waited, the more obvious it became. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a message. A message she didn't want to hear, but couldn't ignore. And here's the contradiction that makes this moment even more painful. Meghan entered the event believing she was still part of this world, that she still had access, still had relevance, still had the kind of social capital that made people stop what they were doing when she approached. But what she discovered, painfully and publicly, was that the hierarchy had shifted. She wasn't a center of gravity anymore. She wasn't a headline presence. She wasn't the woman people rearranged themselves to impress. She was peripheral. And in Hollywood, being peripheral is the closest thing to being invisible. Her confidence faltered again. Not as dramatically as the first time, but enough for anyone paying attention to notice the tremor in her expression. Enough for her team, who were observing from a careful distance, to tense up, watching for signs that the situation might escalate into something worse. Her eyes darted across the room, searching, scanning, trying to find another opportunity, another cluster, another figure, another chance to reclaim control of the narrative. But every time she saw a potential opening, someone else filled it. Someone more connected, more relevant, more welcome. And all the while, Michael was at the center of a growing crowd of admirers, laughing, celebrating, shaking hands, taking photos, accepting praise. His night was unfolding exactly as planned. Smooth, powerful, beautifully curated. While Meghan's night was unraveling thread by thread, and that unraveling was about to accelerate. Because just as she took a step toward a new group, this time one that included 2 studio executives and an Oscar-winning actress, something happened that made her freeze in place. She overheard her own name. Not loudly, not maliciously, not intentionally directed at her, but unmistakably. Her name, spoken quietly by someone she recognized. A well-known industry insider. Someone respected. Someone whose commentary carried weight. And what he said stopped her cold. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What do you do when you hear your name in a room where you're already losing control of the narrative? Do you pretend it isn't happening? Do you pretend you didn't hear it? Or do you freeze, just long enough for the pain to register before you force yourself to keep moving? That was the moment Meghan Markle found herself in, suspended between protecting her image and absorbing a truth she never expected to face in public. Because what she overheard wasn't just an opinion. It wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't just one of those snide remarks whispered at celebrity events for entertainment value. No, what she heard was something far more damaging, far more telling, far more rooted in the reality she had been trying so hard to outrun. She heard someone say, in a low, almost regretful voice, "It's not a good look for Michael if he takes a picture with her tonight." 8 words, softly spoken, weaponized by context, and delivered straight into Meghan's confidence like a needle puncturing a balloon. She wasn't meant to hear it. She wasn't supposed to catch that fragment of truth. But she did. Every syllable. And each one stripped another layer from her carefully constructed composure. Let me ask you something, directly and honestly. Have you ever tried to present your best self while people around you are quietly dismantling your reputation? Have you ever walked into a room thinking you could rewrite the narrative, only to realize the narrative was already written, without your input, without your control, without your consent? Because that's exactly what happened to Meghan in that moment. She wasn't fighting for attention. She was fighting against a storyline she couldn't erase. And for the first time that night, she felt it fully. The shift, the rejection, the freeze-out. Because if Hollywood's power players were worrying about how she would affect Michael's image, then it meant she wasn't neutral. She wasn't harmless. She wasn't just another guest. She was seen as a liability. And that is the one thing Hollywood never forgives. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Barely enough to be noticed by casual onlookers, but more than enough for those who understood emotional microreactions. Her team noticed. A photographer nearby noticed. The actress in the group Meghan had been trying to join noticed. They saw the stiffening of her jaw, the brief tightening around her eyes, the forced swallow. She tried to move. She tried to redirect her path. She tried to step into a safer part of the room, but her steps felt heavier now, less confident, less strategic. Every movement felt like it was being observed, measured, judged. The room no longer felt like a stage to reclaim glory. It felt like a maze she had accidentally wandered into without a map. But here's the twist in the emotional contradiction. Even as she was spiraling internally, her public persona, the one she's perfected over years of media scrutiny, kicked in like survival instinct. She straightened her posture. She forced her face into a softer expression. She lifted her chin just a little. The kind of micro-performance that communicates, "I'm fine." But she wasn't, and the room could feel it. Hollywood has an eerie way of sensing weakness without a single word being spoken. The actress she'd been approaching gently turned her back, not in cruelty, but in avoidance. The studio executive subtly shifted his weight, blocking the opening to the circle. A producer glanced down at his phone, signaling disinterest. One by one, the social cues aligned, forming an invisible wall around the group. And Meghan, standing there alone, felt it. She pivoted again, moving toward another cluster of people. But this time, she was slower, less purposeful, less sure of herself. She scanned the room, trying to find someone, anyone, whose expression was warm enough to approach. But warmth was in short supply, because every major Hollywood figure in that room knew something critical. This was Michael B. Jordan's night. His brand was ascending. His relationships were flourishing. His public image was solid gold. And anything that could complicate that image, any association, any photo, any viral moment, was a risk no one wanted to take. Not even by accident. Not even briefly. Not even out of politeness. And Meghan had just realized she was that risk. Her eyes flicked toward Michael again. He was laughing with a director, accepting congratulations from fellow actors, fully immersed in the glow of his moment. His energy was electric. His presence dominated the space. Every camera wanted him. Every conversation revolved around him. Every industry insider wanted a moment of connection with him. But not with her. Not tonight. This wasn't the Hollywood she once flirted with. This wasn't the Hollywood she expected to return to. This wasn't the Hollywood that had once embraced her because of her royal storyline. This was the Hollywood that had outgrown her. And that realization triggered a wave of panic beneath her calm exterior. She needed an out. A new moment. A fresh opportunity to shift the narrative. A second attempt to salvage the night before it spiraled completely beyond repair. And so she began searching for someone whose presence could anchor her socially. Someone big enough to create a counterbalance to Michael's refusal. Someone who could legitimize her presence in the room. She spotted a director known for championing diverse voices. She spotted an actress known for her activism. She spotted a beloved comedian whose presence could soften any awkward moment. But each person she considered was already absorbed in a conversation, or surrounded by people, or simply too inaccessible. And the clock was ticking, because in Hollywood, public perception can shift faster than a camera flash. So Meghan pushed forward, determined not to let the night slip into humiliation. She approached another A-lister. This time a younger actor known for his breakout roles and his affable personality. He smiled when he saw her. Friendly, harmless, gentle, a rare moment of warmth in a frosty room. For a split second, hope flickered in her expression. But the actor's smile didn't extend far enough. It didn't invite her to join the group. It didn't offer refuge. It was polite. Nothing more. She was still standing on the outside. She was still being managed, not welcomed. And then, just as Meghan inhaled to speak, something happened that cut through the room again. Michael's name was announced for an exclusive backstage meet and greet before the ceremony began. A private moment reserved for key industry players. And instantly, the entire crowd shifted toward him like gravitational pull. Meghan watched as everyone she needed, everyone she hoped to connect with, moved away from her and toward him. The hallway opened. The security detail stepped forward. The exclusive group formed. The photographers rushed. The energy surged. And Meghan stood alone in the wake of that movement. She wasn't invited. She wasn't included. She wasn't considered. Her team kept their distance, trained, disciplined, waiting for her to signal. But she didn't, because signaling meant admitting that the night wasn't going the way she'd planned. She pressed her lips together. She inhaled slowly. She blinked once, hard, trying to contain the emotion rising in her chest. But it was too late. Because the cameras weren't the only ones watching. Several A-listers witnessed the entire chain reaction, from Michael's refusal to the producer's reinforcement to the quiet avoidance to the private backstage gathering she wasn't invited to. And those witnesses weren't cruel, but they were honest. And honesty, in Hollywood, can be devastating. Meghan was on the outside, visibly, painfully, undeniably. And as the last of the A-list circle disappeared behind the backstage curtain with Michael, Meghan's expression finally cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough for someone standing nearby to see the glistening at the edges of her eyes. She turned away quickly, trying to hide it, trying to steady herself, trying to reclaim control. But she couldn't, because the night had just made something brutally clear. She wasn't part of this world anymore. And as she blinked back tears she refused to let fall, she stepped away from the crowd, not knowing that the next chapter of the night would hit her even harder, and from someone she never expected to collide with. What if I told you that before Meghan Markle even stepped foot into the venue, the entire atmosphere of the 2025 American Cinematheque Awards was already wired with the kind of tension that doesn't come from scandal, but from power? The kind of tension that builds when you gather the most influential directors, the most aggressively courted actors, and the most strategically polished Hollywood elites under one single roof. Because this wasn't just another red carpet. This wasn't a charity gala. This wasn't an event where people showed up to be photographed, sip champagne, and pretend to be interested in speeches. This was a night that existed for one purpose: to honor Michael B. Jordan. And everything. The lighting, the pacing, the chatter, the press choreography revolved around him. The Cinematheque Awards has always been serious. But this year the seriousness felt almost cinematic. Even the air felt different the moment you walked in. Crisp, controlled, curated. Like a scene from a prestige drama where every supporting character knows their role, every camera angle has been tested, and every whisper could spark the next industry headline. And the first thing anyone noticed was the way people moved. Not casually, not freely, but with purpose, precision, and anticipation. You could see it in the way executives clutched their phones, in the way agents hovered near their clients, in the way rising actors subtly positioned themselves near veteran filmmakers, hoping to catch the right eye. This was Hollywood's inner machinery, polished, confident, ruthless, turning at full speed. But the real electricity came from something simpler. The knowledge that tonight was Michael's night. He hadn't even arrived yet, and people were already talking about him. Not in a fangirl way, not in a fame-thirsty way, but in a tone reserved for someone whose name holds actual weight. A director who just wrapped a major studio film leaned in toward a cinematographer and whispered, "He's the future. This is only the beginning." An agent nearby nodded. "Studios build slates around him now." A producer added, almost reverently, "Everyone wants to work with him." And what struck people wasn't just that Michael was respected, it was that he was trusted. In Hollywood, those two things rarely travel together. So the room buzzed with that reverence, that admiration, that unmistakable recognition of a man who had climbed the industry not through controversy, but through consistency. Michael represented something increasingly rare. Talent without scandal, success without chaos, popularity without desperation. And that's exactly why tonight felt sacred. People wanted to be part of his moment. They wanted to be seen supporting him. They wanted to align with the rising force that was pushing Hollywood into its next era. And that's what made the energy inside the venue so charged. But let's go deeper. The venue itself was transformed. Not in an over-the-top, gaudy award show way, but in an elegant, cinematic way that perfectly matched the spirit of the event. Tall arches draped in warm amber light created a visual echo of classic Hollywood. Deep navy and gold accents brought a sense of richness without overshadowing the purpose of the night. The floral arrangements were understated but lush. The seating layout was intentionally intimate. Tight enough for conversations, open enough for cameras, perfectly structured so that nobody important felt sidelined. The lobby area pulsed with conversation, clinking glasses, tight-lipped laughter, and hushed excitement. You could tell which tables belonged to which studios by the way people clustered. Warner Brothers had a sharply dressed corner, clean lines, controlled expressions, not a single out-of-place hair. Netflix's group looked more relaxed, but with the kind of confidence that comes from having more money than time. A24's presence was subtle but unmistakably artistic. Dark fabrics, bold silhouettes, faces that looked like they belonged in moody close-ups. And within all these groups, the one topic of conversation that kept resurfacing was Michael. His filmography, his persona, his influence, his upcoming slate, and the industry belief that he was stepping into an era of dominance. Now, here's the twist. This wasn't just admiration. This was strategic positioning. People weren't just appreciating him, they were orbiting him. Because in Hollywood, aligning yourself with the rising star isn't just about praise. It's about survival. It's about opportunity. It's about staying close to power so you don't get swallowed by irrelevance. And as the night pressed on, it became painfully clear that Michael's orbit was going to be packed, competitive, and meticulously guarded. Which is exactly what made the atmosphere so dangerous for Meghan Markle. Because this was a room where everyone knew exactly why they were there. And she didn't. But we'll get to that. Let's first explore what the room felt like socially, because this is where the tension really brewed. Hollywood events are not democratic spaces. They look glamorous, but the hierarchy is carved into the air. You see it in the way people greet each other. Who gets the double kiss? Who gets the warm hug? Who gets the handshake? And who gets the polite half-smile that means, I don't value you enough to pretend I remember your name. You see it in the way conversations form. Tighter circles for the powerful, looser clusters for the hopeful, isolated duos for the anxious. You see it in the way eyes move, some people scanning the room for opportunities, others scanning for cameras, others scanning for exits when the wrong person approaches. And this night, more than most, the hierarchy was rigid. At the top, Michael's inner group, directors who adored him, actors who admired him, producers who counted on him, executives who built budgets around him. These people weren't here to socialize. They were here to secure relationships. And they weren't playing. Below that, the established A-listers who knew how to navigate a room without appearing desperate. They laughed loudly, clinked glasses with ease, and looked effortlessly glamorous without breaking a sweat. These were the people who showed up to be seen, not to chase anyone. Below them, the industry workers, writers, cinematographers, casting directors, who may not be household names, but whose influence quietly shapes Hollywood. They observed everything. They analyzed everyone. They knew exactly who mattered and who was fading. And then, scattered at the edges, were the aspirational attendees. Influencers, rising actors, socialites, people whose publicists begged for invites in hopes of sparking a career breakthrough. This was the ecosystem Meghan stepped into. A place where every smile had a motive. Every glance had meaning. Every interaction was a negotiation in disguise. But even before she arrived, the atmosphere had been shifting. It happened minutes before her entry, when news spread through the venue that Michael was on his way. You could literally feel the ripple. People straightened their posture, makeup artists did last-minute touch-ups, photographers adjusted their straps, and PR teams whispered rapid-fire strategy into their clients' ears. Why? Because when someone like Michael walks into a room, you want to be positioned correctly, not just physically, but socially. Whether you stand beside him, greet him first, catch his eye from across the room, or simply exist in his orbit, it all matters. It shapes perception. And perception is everything in Hollywood. As the anticipation tightened the room's energy, the air became thick, not tense, but electric. This was the moment everyone had been priming for. It was the moment the cameras wanted. The moment agents plotted for. The moment publicists lived for. But for Meghan, this atmosphere wasn't just electric. It was dangerous, because she wasn't part of the machinery. She wasn't integrated into the social hierarchy. She wasn't someone these people were positioning themselves around. She was an anomaly. Someone who made the room tense in a different way. Someone whose presence created questions. Someone who brought unpredictability to a night that demanded everything be perfectly controlled. And if you've ever been in a room where your presence disrupts the flow, even subtly, you know the discomfort that comes with it. The shift in energy you can't deny. The feeling that you're playing by rules you didn't learn. But the irony here is that Meghan didn't feel it at first. She walked in with confidence, assuming she still carried the kind of social weight she once wielded. She assumed the cameras would pivot. The conversations would pause. The eyes would follow. But the truth was brutal and immediate. The room didn't shift when she entered, not even by an inch. What shifted was something else, something colder, something quieter, something that crept through the space like a warning no one wanted to verbalize. It was the subtle awareness that Meghan was not here for the Cinematheque Awards. She was here for a moment that didn't belong to her, a moment the room would not allow her to take. Because this night belonged to one man, and anyone who tried to hijack that story would face consequences, social ones, reputational ones, narrative ones. And Meghan was about to learn that the hard way. But before the refusal, before the whispers, before the stares, something else happened, something that set the entire night into motion. Michael B. Jordan arrived. The doors opened. The cameras fired. Conversations halted. And every single head in the room turned toward the entrance. Because the king of the night had entered his kingdom. And Meghan, standing near the edge of the room, turned too, eyes widening just enough to reveal one thing. She saw her chance. But what she didn't see was the wall of resistance that was already building around him, slowly, quietly, powerfully, ready to block anyone who threatened the sanctity of his moment. And she had no idea that she was already the biggest threat of all. Because what happened next was the moment the entire night began to unravel. Have you ever watched someone walk into a room convinced they're still the star, only to discover everyone else has moved on? That's exactly the energy Meghan Markle walked in with at the American Cinematheque Awards 2025. Confidence, poise, precision, every step intentional, every angle calculated, every facial expression crafted like she was stepping onto the set of a prestige drama rather than entering a tightly guarded Hollywood ecosystem that no longer revolved around her. And in that contradiction, the belief versus the reality, is where everything started to crack. Because here's something people often misunderstand about Meghan. She doesn't enter rooms. She performs entrances. And this night was no different. She didn't simply walk through the doors of the ceremony. She glided, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes scanning, a curated half-smile sitting perfectly on her lips. It wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. She knew cameras would be waiting. She knew spectators would judge. She knew industry eyes would assess. So she delivered an entrance designed to reclaim relevance. An entrance meant to broadcast that she still belonged among Hollywood's elite. But the room didn't buy it. Not because she didn't look stunning. She did. Not because she wasn't poised. She was. Not because she wasn't familiar. Hollywood knows her face like it knows its own scandals. No, the reason the room didn't buy her entrance was far simpler. Her energy didn't match the room's energy. She walked in with expectation. The room was operating on admiration for someone else. She walked in seeking alignment. The room was orbiting one man, Michael B. Jordan. And the moment Meghan entered, she felt it. That subtle, invisible barrier. That polite but chilling pause. That collective shift of attention that skipped over her like she was scenery instead of significance. Her smile didn't drop, not yet. But her eyes flicked to the nearest group of actors, silently searching for warmth, recognition, familiarity. And at first glance, she found it. Or at least she thought she did. An actress she'd met years ago gave her a bright smile. Meghan lifted her hand slightly, ready for a greeting, but the actress's attention snapped away just seconds later when a director called her name. Not intentionally dismissive, just indifferent. But in Hollywood, indifference cuts deeper than open rejection. Meghan took another step into the room, then another. She scanned, adjusted, tilted her head just enough to signal openness. But the people closest to her didn't move. They didn't open their circles. They didn't shift their bodies. They didn't invite. They simply paused for a breath, gave her a tight-lipped smile, and continued their conversations. And that was the first sign. Not hostility, not mockery, not disdain, just distance. Polite, controlled, intentional distance. The Hollywood kind. Because the truth was simple, this event wasn't structured for surprise entrances. It wasn't structured for celebrity theatrics. It wasn't structured for scattered attention. It was structured around Michael. And Meghan stepping into that space without alignment to that orbit created friction from the moment her heel touched the carpet. But Meghan didn't falter. Not publicly. She adjusted instantly. Her posture straightened. Her hands moved gracefully. Her smile widened a millimeter. Enough to seem genuine, not enough to seem desperate. She nodded to familiar faces, even when they didn't return the same level of enthusiasm. Because this was the version of Meghan the public rarely sees. The hyper-aware strategist who recalibrates in real time, scanning for opportunities, adjusting to the room's temperature, studying the social map with military precision. She drifted toward a group of producers, slowly, naturally, as though she'd simply wandered there. But producers are trained observers. Their expressions didn't soften. If anything, they stiffened. One man smiled politely, but his body angled toward the colleague he was speaking with, a subtle signal of not now. Meghan's smile tightened, just a fraction of a fraction. But she kept moving. She spotted a streaming executive she'd met at an event years earlier. She stepped closer. He acknowledged her with a quick nod, then immediately turned his attention back to a rising actor he'd been courting for a potential project. Strike two. Still, Meghan pressed forward. She wasn't going to linger on the outskirts like a guest who'd arrived by accident. She was going to be seen, not in a desperate way, but in a still relevant way, the way one might reclaim the center of a story they once dominated. Her hair was perfect, her posture flawless, her dress chosen to photograph beautifully from every angle. This was her comeback night, or at least her attempt at one, and she was determined to manufacture a moment. That's when she changed tactics. She began moving with intention toward a location with higher visibility, the mid-lobby camera sweep zone. It wasn't the red carpet. It wasn't backstage. It was the floating area where industry press captured candid interactions between celebrities, often more valuable than posed photos because they appeared unfiltered. And Meghan was smart. She positioned herself just close enough to a notable actor-director duo to be in the background of several shots. Subtle, strategic, calculated. She let her posture angle toward the cameras. She adjusted her shoulder. She let the lights hit her face. But something happened that she didn't expect. The journalists didn't zoom in. The photographers didn't reorient their lenses. The nearby videographer didn't shift toward her. They all stayed focused on the duo discussing a project. Meghan wasn't in the frame. Or rather, she wasn't important enough to be in the frame. This realization flickered across her eyes again. That tiny flash of disappointment she tried desperately to hide. So she pivoted again, toward the bar area, a quieter location, but a space where she might catch someone important who was momentarily free. She spotted a recognizable figure, an actor with whom she'd shared a stage once during a philanthropic event. His back was turned, but Meghan approached with gentle confidence, her smile growing as she tapped his arm lightly. He turned. His face brightened. He said hello warmly. For a second, one glorious second, she felt like the room was shifting in her favor. But then it happened. He looked over her shoulder. His expression changed. He stiffened with excitement. Not for her, but because Michael B. Jordan had entered the room. Cameras fired. Publicists surged. Executives moved like magnets toward him. The actor excused himself before Meghan could even finish her sentence, half apologetic, half distracted, and hurried toward the growing crowd forming around Michael. And that was the moment Meghan realized something she wasn't prepared for. She was at the wrong event. Not because she didn't belong socially. Not because she wasn't dressed appropriately. Not because she lacked charisma. But because the room only had space for one star tonight. And it wasn't her. Let's pause here. Let's ask the real question. Have you ever walked into a gathering where you thought you would be the center of some conversation, only to find out everyone is there for someone else? Not just excited about them, but devoted to them? That kind of imbalance doesn't just hurt. It destabilizes your confidence. It erodes the illusion of importance you walked in with. It makes you feel like a ghost haunting a party that wasn't meant for you. That's exactly what Meghan felt. But to her credit, she didn't retreat. She didn't hide. She didn't panic visibly. Instead, she doubled down. She tightened her smile. Her eyes sharpened. Her chin lifted a touch higher. Her shoulders squared. Her pace slowed, becoming more deliberate. Because she was recalibrating for a new goal. If she couldn't dominate the room, she would dominate a moment. And that moment, in her mind, was with Michael. She saw him greeting industry icons. She saw him being pulled into VIP photo ops. She saw him surrounded by every power player she'd hoped to impress. He was the sun, and the room orbited him. And Meghan? She was determined to catch that sunlight, even if she had to step directly into his orbit to get it. That's when she began moving toward him. Not immediately, not recklessly, Not obviously, but slowly, strategically, as if she were simply mingling in his direction. She positioned herself near the outer edge of his orbit. She adjusted her hair. Her eyes tracked him. Her smile softened into something warm and calculated. This was it. Her moment. Her chance to reclaim relevance. Her chance to attach her image to the biggest star of the night. This was the plan. Her approach was set. Her timing was measured. Her confidence was rising again. She took a breath, took a step forward, another, and then she stopped, because someone stepped into her path, someone she did not expect, someone whose presence instantly shifted the tone, someone who looked her directly in the eyes, before turning away and joining Michael, leaving her frozen, confused, exposed, and suddenly aware that the room wasn't just indifferent to her. It was actively working against her. And what came next would not only deepen the humiliation, it would trigger the unraveling of the entire night. Have you ever wondered what goes through the mind of a man who is standing on the edge of the biggest night of his career? Not a publicity stunt, not a movie premiere, not some curated red carpet designed to boost an image, but a night where Hollywood itself stops, looks at you, and says, "You've earned this." Because that's the exact headspace Michael B. Jordan was in before the collision with Meghan Markle ever happened, before the whispers, before the refusals, before the emotional unraveling, before the awkwardness that the world would later dissect like forensic experts. Michael wasn't thinking about controversy. He wasn't thinking about drama. He wasn't thinking about unexpected attendees. His mind was locked onto something far more powerful, his legacy. This wasn't just another award ceremony for him. It wasn't background noise in the career of a famous man. This was the American Cinematheque Award, the kind of honor Hollywood gives only to those who have proven their staying power, consistency, influence, depth, people who have truly contributed to cinema, not just to tabloids. So when Michael was preparing to walk into that room, his energy was laser-focused. His attention was on the work that brought him here, the roles that shifted culture, the films that made studios trust him, the projects where he proved he wasn't just a star, he was a force. He knew the weight of the night. He carried it like armor, polished and prideful, but earned through sweat and sacrifice. And yet, even with all that honor pressing around him, Michael wasn't nervous. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't jittery. He was centered, calm, strong, the kind of calm that only comes when you truly understand your purpose. His team noticed it. His publicist quietly commented on it. "He's ready." His manager made a joke about how it was like watching a king walk into his coronation. Even his security detail felt the shift. Michael was moving like a man who had already decided who he was, and no external noise could touch that inner certainty. But here's where things get interesting. Because Michael's focus wasn't just on the honor. It was also on the people who were coming to celebrate him. Directors he respected, actors he admired, producers he trusted, studio heads who valued him, mentors who guided him, rising talents he wanted to support. He knew this room was full of people who mattered, not because of fame, but because of work, real contributions, real artistry. And that's exactly why he wasn't prepared for the brand of chaos that Meghan Markle would eventually inject into the evening. Not because he had anything against her, not because he disliked her, not because he had some secret feud with her, but because she wasn't part of the world he was operating in that night. Michael has a finely tuned instinct when it comes to public appearances. He knows exactly when to engage, when to step back, when to allow a moment, and when to protect himself. That instinct has saved him from PR disasters countless times without the world even knowing. And on this night, that instinct was sharper than ever. He was hyper-aware that every move would be photographed, every angle examined, every interaction interpreted, because that's what happens when an actor becomes a symbol, when their career transcends roles and becomes a cultural touchpoint. The moment before he stepped inside the venue, Michael took one last breath behind the curtain. Not a nervous breath, a grounding one. His stylist adjusted his suit. His manager reminded him about the timing cues. His assistant straightened his cufflinks. His security detail ran over the entry formation. And then, with a slow, confident exhale, he stepped forward into the roar of cameras and the bright, demanding lights. Flash, flash, flash. It was immediate. The reaction was visceral. Photographers calling his name, fans screaming, press leaning forward, producers smiling on site, executives whispering with pride. The energy wasn't chaotic, it was celebratory. It was the kind of welcome only Hollywood royalty receives. And Michael didn't shy away from it. He acknowledged it with humility, grace, and that signature warm smile that made people feel both admiration and ease. But even within all that celebration, Michael wasn't distracted. He remained fully aware of his surroundings. Who was approaching, who was waiting, who was trying too hard, who was keeping respectful distance. This sensitivity wasn't paranoia. It was professionalism. He understood that attention is currency in Hollywood, and he knew how to manage it without letting it manage him. So when he entered the main lobby, already surrounded by industry elites eager to greet him, he wasn't caught off guard. He expected the pull. He expected the crowd. He expected the energy. What he didn't expect was someone maneuvering through that energy for reasons that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with PR positioning. He didn't see Meghan yet, but she saw him. And that difference, who saw who first, is what changed everything. Michael was deep in conversation with a director he admired, laughing, discussing a recent film, planning a future collaboration. His body language was open but grounded, connected to the moment but not overly accessible. And that's the key. Michael operates with intention. When he's in work mode, he stays in work mode. When he's networking, he's fully present. When he's honoring someone, he's respectful. And when he's being honored, his boundaries become even tighter. Not cold, just firm. Because protecting his image protects his work. Protecting his work protects his opportunities. And protecting his opportunities protects his legacy. That's why his PR team watched the room like hawks. Not paranoid hawks. Professional hawks. They scanned for unpredictable factors. Potential drama. Unplanned interactions. People who might try to capitalize on proximity to Michael. And when Meghan began drifting into his orbit, they noticed instantly. They didn't panic. They didn't react visibly. But they tightened subtly. Prepared. On guard. Ready to redirect if needed. Not because Meghan was toxic, but because she was unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one thing Michael could not afford that night. Meanwhile, Michael remained blissfully unaware of her approach. Not because he was ignoring her, but because he wasn't looking for her. She simply wasn't part of his mental landscape. He was tuned into conversations that mattered to him. Artistry, upcoming projects, meaningful connections. And Meghan was approaching with an energy that wasn't aligned with that vibration. Her approach wasn't malicious, but it was intentional. And Michael could feel intention from miles away. Not because he's dramatic, but because he's perceptive. He felt her presence before he saw her. A subtle shift in the energy. The kind of shift that happens when someone approaches with personal goals rather than genuine connection. He didn't turn immediately. He continued speaking with his circle. But something in him tightened. A quiet alertness, the kind that comes from years of navigating fame with awareness rather than arrogance. And then he saw her, smiling, polished, purposeful. Her expression was friendly, professional, warm, but there was something else beneath it. Something calculated, something rehearsed, something that signaled she wasn't there to support him. She was there to be near him. Michael's face didn't change. He remained polite, calm, open, but not inviting, because he already knew what was coming. Meghan approached with that familiar, warm but strategic smile she uses when she wants something without appearing like she wants something. She greeted him with familiarity, even though they had never shared enough history to justify that level of connection. Michael nodded, smiled, offered a polite greeting. Nothing rude, nothing dismissive, just neutral. And that neutrality was the first refusal. Not a no, not a pushback, not a boundary spoken aloud. Just neutrality. A professional wall. A quiet line drawn without force. But Meghan didn't read it. Or she chose not to. Because she continued. She leaned in slightly. She angled her face toward him. She positioned herself for the cameras circling nearby. And then she suggested it. The moment she'd been building toward. Let's grab a quick photo. Michael's instinct clicked into place. Time slowed. His team froze in anticipation. The energy shifted. He knew exactly what that photo would become. He knew what the tabloids would do with it. He knew what narratives it would feed. He knew how it could overshadow the meaning of the night. He knew how it could be misconstrued. He knew how it would leak into the internet faster than the speech he'd spent weeks preparing. So he said it. No. Calm. Respectful. Final. And here's the part people don't realize. Michael didn't refuse Meghan. He refused the moment. He refused the narrative. He refused the implication. He refused the PR exploitation. He refused anything that could muddy the significance of his honor. But that wasn't the end. Because after he said no, something else happened. Something that set the entire room into motion. Something Meghan didn't expect. Something Michael didn't intend. Something the audience would later replay over and over again. Michael didn't just decline the photo. He explained why. A single, quiet sentence, heard by just enough people to start a chain reaction that Meghan would feel like a physical blow. And that sentence? It was the moment everything spiraled. Because what he said next wasn't just a reason. It was a message. A message Meghan was never supposed to hear. A message the room instantly understood. A message that reshaped the energy of the entire night. And that message was about to hit her harder than the refusal itself. Have you ever watched someone step into a moment believing they're about to shine, only to walk straight into a wall they never saw coming? That was Meghan Markle's reality as she approached Michael B. Jordan inside the American Cinematheque Awards 2025. Everything she thought she understood about the room, about her relevance, about her ability to control a narrative, about her place in Hollywood, shattered in less than 60 seconds. And the most brutal part? The implosion didn't begin with a rejection. It began with something far more unsettling: neutrality. Because when Meghan made her first approach, she wasn't nervous. She wasn't hesitant. She wasn't doubting herself. If anything, she moved with the poise of a woman who believed she was doing everyone a favor by stepping into their line of sight. Her chin was lifted, her smile steady, her shoulders relaxed. Not a single hair out of place. She knew the cameras were nearby. She knew photographers would catch the moment instantly if it went well. She knew publicists would whisper about the interaction later. And she believed, genuinely, that Michael would welcome her with open arms, or at the very least, with enough warmth to secure a flattering angle. But the problem wasn't her confidence. It was her miscalculation. She approached at the exact wrong moment. Not wrong because Michael was busy. Not wrong because he was distracted. Not wrong because the timing was inconvenient. Wrong because Michael was emotionally anchored in something far more powerful than politeness: purpose. He wasn't mingling casually. He wasn't drifting through conversations. He wasn't scanning the room for social opportunities. He was locked, fully, intentionally, into a circle of people who mattered to him. Directors he respected, producers who had shaped his career, filmmakers he admired, mentors he wanted to honor. This wasn't schmoozing. This was gratitude, legacy, reflection. And Meghan walked into that circle with an agenda that clashed violently with the energy he was holding. But let's slow down. Let's break down the moment exactly as it happened. Meghan drifted closer, her steps subtle. Not rushed, not obvious. A glide, what she likely believed was an effortless, natural entry. But the people around Michael noticed first. His publicist glanced sideways. His manager paused mid-sentence. An industry friend narrowed her eyes slightly, recognition mixing with unease. A producer whispered something under his breath. They weren't worried Meghan would embarrass Michael with something dramatic. This wasn't about scandal. This was about optics. Association. Headlines. The wrong photo taken at the wrong time could twist Michael's celebration into someone else's storyline. And that someone was now approaching. Meghan stepped forward into the circle's perimeter. Her smile brightened. Her hand lifted slightly, just enough to signal greeting. Her posture leaned in, inviting connection. Michael noticed her only when the conversation shifted. Not because she stole his attention, she didn't, but because the group's energy realigned. That's how controlled the environment around him was. People didn't interrupt unless something unexpected was happening. Michael turned. Casual, calm, polite. A soft half-smile forming automatically, because he is, above all, courteous. And then he saw who it was. Meghan. The flicker in his eyes was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was real. Not shock, not discomfort, not annoyance. Recognition, followed by calculation, followed by restraint. Michael is trained for these moments. He knows when a greeting is genuine and when a greeting is strategic. And in those 2 seconds before Meghan spoke, he read her intentions immediately. He felt her energy. He sensed the pretense. He saw the cameras inching closer. And he understood that this wasn't a social hello. This was a setup for a photo. But Meghan didn't sense his hesitation. Or she ignored it. Or she chose optimism over instinct. Because she leaned in with the warm, overly familiar tone of someone trying to create chemistry out of thin air. "Michael, it's so good to see you. Too warm. Too quick. Too forward. Too performative. Actors can spot performance like wolves smell fear." Michael smiled lightly, but his eyes told the truth. He wasn't connecting. He was being polite. Nothing more. His handshake was brief. His posture stable, not open. His stance signaling, "I'm here, but I'm not available." Meghan either didn't notice or refused to interpret it correctly. She continued. She complimented his award. She congratulated him warmly. She even touched his arm lightly, just a 2-second gesture meant to create a photo-ready moment. And for the first time, Michael took a half-step back. Not big enough to embarrass her. Small enough to seem incidental. But clear enough to anyone who knew him. He was establishing distance. Body language speaks louder than words. And Michael spoke volumes. Still, Meghan kept her smile intact. Her chin lifted. Her eyes sparkled. She was fully in actress mode, performing the warmth she wished the room reflected back at her. That's when she said it. A light laugh. A playful tone. A gesture toward the nearby photographers. "We should get a photo." There it was. The request. The goal. The moment she'd rehearsed internally. The opportunity she believed would mark her return to Hollywood relevance. Michael didn't hesitate. Didn't fumble. Didn't stall. Didn't pretend to think about it. He simply said, "Not tonight." Soft. Calm. Neutral. Delivered with a tone that was both firm and final. And the silence that swallowed the circle immediately afterward was deafening. Not because he rejected her, but because he rejected the moment. And in Hollywood, that's far more brutal. Meghan's smile froze. Her eyes widened, just barely. The corners of her mouth trembled before she reset them. She laughed lightly, pretending she hadn't just been turned down in front of people.